Hi, Bio 245. This is Vanessa again, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the rest of these weirdo terms on your list so that we can get a better understanding for them. So I brought out this cross section of a spinal cord, and you can actually see it even has the vertebrae around it. So in case you guys didn't know from when we learned about the skeleton, whenever something is the back or dorsal, right, or posterior, there's the spine of your vertebrae, and that points backwards. Kind of like if somebody's really skinny, you can see their bones sticking out, their vertebrae sticking out. And this is going to be ventral or anterior, so just to orient you. But I want to talk about a couple of these terms. So the first term on here that's kind of weird is ganglia. So ganglia is pretty much strictly found in nervous tissue, in peripheral nervous tissue. So in other words, like this is central nervous right here, because this is the spinal cord, and this is more peripheral here because it's branching off. And I have that'll work fine. And this is peripheral because it's branching off and away from your spinal cord. Whenever we have a ganglia is just a swelling. So you can actually see, probably better on this side, that we have this nerve coming off of the spinal cord and it's going out. And here's this big old swelling, so that is going to be your ganglia. And typically a ganglia is having the cell body inside of that swelling, but just know that that's essentially what that is. You'll probably learn more about it in your lecture course, but for the lab, that's all you really need to know. Next on your list, you'll see there's afferent and efferent. So people get a little bit confused about these, so I'll explain it to you the best way that I can. But I also have these little arrows on here. So you'll notice that, like I said, this is posterior or dorsal. I'm going to say dorsal from here on out. And this is anterior or ventral. I'm going to say ventral from here on out. So from this dorsal side, we have this nerve coming out like I showed you before. And then it has this really big swelling. And then it actually branches right here and continues on its merry way. Okay. Same here with the ventral. We have this nerve coming from the ventral side. And it's continuing here next to the ganglia. And it continues on its merry way this direction, okay? So that's still part of the same system. So you guys may have heard before of dorsal and, let's see, let me just write this out here. So there's these two acronyms. Is it an acronym or is it, I don't know. But where you have letters that mean stuff, okay?
Mnemonic device.
Mnemonic device, there we go. So this is the way that some people remember which is which. You guys don't need to know that if dorsal is sensory or motor, you don't need to know any of that kind of stuff in this class, but I just wanted to throw this out there. So first off, dorsal is typically afferent, which I'll talk about in a second, and then ventral is typically efferent, so that's Dave, so I would write that down if I were you guys. And then sensory is typically afferent, and then motor is typically efferent. So let's think about what that means. Afferent always means that it's coming in. Okay, afferent comes in. Okay, so that message is coming in from somewhere. And if we're looking at this guy here, same, that makes sense. If you're sensing something, that message is coming from your external environment and going in towards your spinal cord. Okay, efferent is going out or exiting. So it goes out or it exits, okay? So afferent is coming in from somewhere, so like sensory stimuli. Efferent is going to exit the spinal cord. So in this case, we have that motor example, right? So motor is efferent. So a motor action is going to first come from the brain, down the spinal cord, and then out into the nervous system, and that's an efferent pathway, okay? Okay, and I have that illustrated here, because remember I have that other one here, that Dave. So we know that sensory is afferent, it's coming in. Motor is efferent, it's going out. Just FYI, dorsal is afferent, coming in. Ventral is efferent, going out. So I have that demonstrated here. Whenever we have our message coming from the brain and down, it's going to leave via that dorsal nerve here, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about a little later. And that is efferent, it's leaving, okay? So if we're getting sensory information, there's sensory information out in this environment, that is afferent, and it's entering in via this ventral nerve towards the spinal cord. Okay? So just wanted to talk about that. And then what is a nerve versus an axon, right? So a nerve versus an axon is kind of the same concept as a muscle versus a muscle fiber, okay? So a muscle fiber, if you get a bunch of them together, you get a fascicle. You get a bunch of those fascicles together, you get a muscle. Same thing for nervous tissue. So if you get a bunch of axons together, you get a fascicle of axons. If you put a bunch of those fascicles together of those axons, then you get a nerve, okay? So in other words, a nerve is a collection of a bunch of different cells' axons. So I just wanted to explain that as well. Now, covering each individual axon to make sure that it is protected is a material that is referred to as myelin. So I have this cool little drawing that I made, but you can also refer back to the model as well because it shows myelin. But this is just a simplistic drawing, so I think sometimes they're a little easier to understand. But here's your cell body, and that's indicated with a nucleus there. We have our dendrites, and I have little arrows drawn showing that the dendrites send in information. And then here is its axon going all the way out. Okay, an axon, I have a little arrow as well, indicating that that message is going down and out. Wrapping around the axon here, we have these little beads, and you may recall them from that nerve, or that neuron model. But these big beads are made up mainly of fats and whatnot, but they are called myelin. Okay, myelin is basically an insulator. So you can think about an electrical cord, and you wrap that stuff around it, so usually like some kind of rubbery material, so that you cannot lose your message. Myelin's the same ordeal. Myelin wraps up your axon to keep ions inside, to make sure that the action potential gets from here to wherever it's going to go. Okay? So here's myelin right here. Between those beads of myelin is something called a neurofibril node, but more commonly it's referred to as the nodes of Ranvier. So when we pull these terms, we pull them directly from your textbook. So you should be able to look back to your textbook and look at your list and be like, oh, okay, those are the same. But nodes of Ranvier are just another common term that you'll hear from time to time. But basically, it's these gaps, just like Anna is pointing at here, these gaps between the myelin. So here's a bead of myelin, here's a bead of myelin. This gap in between is the node of Ranvier, or the neurofibril node. Okay. This is just a place that's especially porous to sodium coming in, so that allows that action potential to carry on down the axon for forever. Okay, and it's great. Moving on here, we have the kinds of cells that lay down myelin. Because I mentioned to you before that there's these things called glia, and that they're these support cells, but there's two different kinds, and they both live in different parts of the central nervous system. So first off, we have these guys called oligodendrocytes. So oligodendrocytes, here's the cell right here. So there's his little cell body with his little nucleus being indicated here. Oligodendrocytes hang out in the central nervous system, and they lay down myelin there. So these guys are smart. They can lay down multiple beads of myelin. They don't lay down, a single cell and say, okay, I am now myelin forever. No. They reach out their little arms, and they actually wrap around axons. So this long black thing here, this is an axon, this is an axon, okay? And you can see they're reaching out their little arms, and they're wrapping around that axon, and they're laying down myelin in that fashion. So again, oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system. In the peripheral nervous system, it's a little bit different. So this, again, is our axon going all the way across. In the peripheral nervous system, we have these guys called Schwann cells. Schwann cells, each little bead of myelin that you find in the peripheral nervous system is a Schwann cell. So these guys wrap around the axon, and then that is their existence for the rest of their life. Okay? They're just this bead of myelin. So the way I always remember the difference is that the central nervous system, as you guys know, contains the brain. So if you have the brain and the spinal cord and stuff there, there's a lot of processing that's occurring, and it's smart, right? So you need a smart cell that can multitask and wrap various beads of myelin around your axon. In the peripheral nervous system, it's just kind of dumb. It's sending a message out or it's getting a message in. That's it, okay? So here's these dumb guys who lay down their life for the rest of eternity as a single bead of myelin. Okay, so that's the way I think about it. So Schwann cells are in the peripheral nervous system, oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system. Okay, and next on your list you have stuff called gray matter and white matter. This can be demonstrated in both the spinal cord and the brain. So in the brain, you guys probably are more familiar with it in the brain. In the brain, so you can see I just like took apart this brain here. The gray matter is dominantly in the cortex. Cortex is just the outer layers of your brain, okay? So you can see that there's this white stuff that's deep and that there's this pink stripe here. So the pink, you can imagine it should be gray, but that would be your gray matter. That's where all of your like thoughts are coming from, your processing is occurring, all that kind of stuff is in the gray matter of your brain. There's some deep gray matter as well. Gray matter just indicates cell bodies and unmyelinated stuff, okay? Deep to this gray matter is white stuff, so this is your white matter. White matter is generally myelinated axons, okay? And you can see this in the spinal cord as well. So here in the middle of the spinal cord, so it's kind of flip-flop from the brain, right? So here in the middle of the spinal cord, we have this grayish stuff, so that's going to be where your cell bodies are, so that's your gray matter. And on the outside here, we have the white matter, and that's going to be your myelinated axons. Okay. And just last thing is just a little bit about nerves again. So I talked a little bit about, you know, the individual axon, the bundles of axons called a fascicle, and then the bundles of fascicles referred to as a nerve. Now, you can actually see this on your cell model. So if you look here, it shows here's our axon, and pictorially it actually shows this axon being kind of assembled into a fascicle over here. So I don't know how well you get, there you go. So here is our fascicle right here. So there's an axon going in, there's an axon, etc. Okay? And then here's a nerve over here, and you can see that there's a fascicle, there's a fascicle, there's a fascicle, and that here's the nerve, and the nerve is going to go somewhere. Okay? Okay, so just like in the muscle, we have sheets of connective tissue that protect everything, because that's what you need to have. So surrounding an individual axon is something called an endoneurium. You guys should remember from muscle that endomysium or mesium surrounds an individual muscle cell. So in this case, we have an endoneurium. Surrounding a fascicle is a perineurium, just like a fascicle in muscle tissue is perimesium. And surrounding the axon is the epineurium. Same ordeal. Epi always means on the outside or on the ends of, so it's going to surround the entire nerve. Okay? And there's some better pictures in your PowerPoints and on the internet to depict these, but I just wanted to describe them in the video just to cover them. And that's it for these basic spinal cord terms.